Welcome, everyone, to the National Book Festival. I hope everyone's doing okay. Welcome to Enemies in the Battlefield with my lovely, amazing authors, Marie and Haley. Pronouns for both, she, her. I'm glad you all are here. I can tell you're my people because you guys also like horror. You like something, something vampiric, something, something queer. And you're just all around beautiful. So as a reminder, there will be a Q&A, and I'll make sure to give everyone ample time because this is a full house, so I want to make sure everyone is seen and heard. So for the first question, this will be for both of you. So one thing I enjoy about characters is emotional healing and emotional growth. And to be blunt, both of your characters and all your books just went through stuff. And it was nice to see them come to terms with things or bluntly go through emotions in a very realistic and honest human way, especially when dealing with family. So let's just dive into it. And how did you craft the family dynamics with your characters? So we'll start with Marie. So in yours, it was, because your book is a sequel, congratulations on a sequel, because we love that. So they didn't tell me it was a sequel, so I had to cram both books in 2 weeks.
Oh no!
And it was an emotional journey because it's like, oh God, oh God. But the one relationship that did stick out was Winter and his mom, and then his dad, who could have remained anonymous, but we're here. So please, tell us some more about how you came up with the dynamic with Winter and his mom and the journey he took to, I guess you could say, a path of wellness or at least acceptance with his relationship with his mom.
Thank you so much, and that's such a thoughtful question. It began because, well, the story of Stars and Smoke and Icon and Inferno, thank you for cramming both books, by the way, I appreciate it.
Dedication.
Dedication. Is that, so the story is about this boy named Winter who is a superstar. He's like the world's biggest star, and he's tapped to become a spy. And I have this theory that people who are that driven to be on an arena, to be in a stage full of 50,000 people, or to become like a Taylor Swift, there's something that's driving them. And so my question when I started writing Winter was what is the thing that is pushing you to do this, to need this? And for Winter, it was very much that he just didn't get the love that he needed to get when he was a kid. His relationship with his mom is very complicated. His mother was basically not emotionally accessible to him when he needed her to be there. His father was basically just a terrible person.
Absolutely love him.
Just the worst. But so Winter has this thing where he needs to be on a stage feeling love from people, and he just can't get enough. That's why he wants to be famous. He's like, I need more love, and he doesn't feel it even when he's in this arena with millions of people watching him and everything. So that was my original reason for trying to figure out his trauma. What is your past? What is it that's driving you to need this? And I wanted to make sure there was a difference between the way that he has a complicated relationship with his mom and with his dad, because his mom, she's not a very good mother, but she's not trying to be a bad mother, she's just not good at it. And she has her own trauma that she's dealing with as well. And so Winter has a hard time navigating that because he loves his mother, but he needs to learn how to have the right distance from her and how to navigate that love. And I think a lot of us have that kind of complicated relationship because people are complicated, and I wanted to make sure that relationship felt complicated. At the same time, his father is a terrible person intentionally, and I wanted to.
There's a theme with that between both of your books, but yeah, continue.
Yes, that was a reoccurring theme in the two of them. But I wanted to show a difference with how we have access to the people in our lives. because Winter doesn't want to cut off his mother, but he needs to figure out what a healthy boundary is with her. Whereas with his father, I wanted to also show that like sometimes it's okay to cut out toxic people from your life. And that was something I really wanted to make sure was apparent with the way that he treated his relationships with both his parents and that emotional arc for him.
I love that answer. So thank you so much. Because, oh my God, when his dad showed up, I was like, okay, this can't be, nope, never mind. This took a left, stay left.
Very left.
Oh God. But I do, and I won't get too deep into it because I do have another question. So we'll put a pin in father things and move on to lovely Haley. I love how when I clap, that commands everyone else to clap. So let's keep that going. That's great. So to me, Elise, I hope I'm saying the character's name right, her progress with her father is heavily layered. So I took it as it's a work in progress. There's no beautiful conclusion. It's not going to wrap up in X number of pages, or at least not right now. So it's not as simple as I can write him off, even though I did. So there is a lot of him in her personality, or at least to me, like definitely in the forms of various traumas and anxieties and things like that. And I think it shows up a little bit when she's with Layla, but that's a whole nother thing. We can also put a pin in that because we can go deeper, but talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started this book, I knew that family dynamics were really important to me, and I specifically wanted to have a theme of like kind of overcoming intergenerational trauma in my book, because I know it's like really, really big in Black communities. And I think specifically for historical books, I was very aware of like all the things that have happened in the past and how the consequences of those atrocities carry into the present and through the future. And so I was really curious in how like exploring those various traumas, like how those would impact families. And so you definitely see it in Elisa's relationship with her dad, because he's like not intentionally like evil. Like he really thinks he's, doing a good job at like protecting them, but his protection turns extremely toxic. And so Elise unfortunately bears like the brunt of that, and she really tries to shield her younger sister from that. But she of course kind of picks up on some things that her dad has done, and like she lost her older sister, so there's the trauma there. And there's just so much that she's dealing with as a young girl, and I really wanted to explore that as well, like being a young Black girl and how a lot of young Black girls, especially queer Black girls, are kind of forced to grow up too fast and take on these like adult responsibilities. So yeah, like you said, it's very layered. There's like so much I wanted to explore, but I think specifically like the difference between her and Elise is like, her and Layla, sorry, is they have like, they're raised in like different environments, so they have different ways that they deal with their traumas. And so I really wanted to show that with Layla. She's like a lot more outwardly kind of unhinged and angry, and Elise is like a lot sadder, and like she maybe has more resources to kind of feel those emotions and has more people to go to. But I wanted to basically show readers that there's no one right way to deal with these traumas that you're facing, and there's no one right way to heal. It's different for everyone, and so they definitely have to work through these things to kind of like come together and make a difference in their communities. But it was also just really important for me, because I know a lot of times for Black women, our tones and the way that we react to things can be really policed. So I wanted readers to know that like you should be allowed to feel your emotions no matter what you're feeling. If it's anger, jealousy, rage, sadness, that's okay, and it's human, and it just makes you stronger in the end. So yeah.
Love, because again, put a pin in it because there's so much to say about Tobias Saint. But we'll pivot back to Marie. So Winter Young, he has grown between the two books, because again, this is Icon and Inferno is definitely a sequel. So we were introduced to him in Stars and Smoke, where he was a pop star going through the things, bouncing through relationships, mom, grief, and now, hello, hi, kidnap, but don't worry about that, you're a spy. Yes or no, we can hurt your family, but we're not saying that.
No pressure.
None. And in this book, we've seen him in Stars and Smoke, I guess you can say we saw him still dealing with the grief of Artie and not sure how to piece it or to maybe come to terms or make it a little lighter for him. But we see that a little bit more in Icon Inferno, where he's definitely internalizing more that he learned from Artie, and he's coming to terms or coming to a resolution with his mom, because they did have a moment in the first book where she did see him, and they had that heart to heart where she, the wall came down and she was actually able to talk to him and connect with him. So in the year and the couple of months of him being a spy, falling in love, getting shot at, all of the things, what were your thoughts on writing Winter Young in the second book and versus how you wrote him in the first book? And did you have any goals for him, and what did you not make?
Wow, that's a great question. When I go into writing a book, I don't usually know what my specific goal is for the character. I just know that this is a character that I really want to write. I find them really interesting, and I'm gonna explore their character as I'm going. I'm a very chaotic writer. Like I try to outline, but mostly I just pants my way through, and by chapter 4, I'm just off in the weeds. So I don't know those things usually, and with this series, it wasn't until I started writing the sequel that I started understanding why Winter was doing the things that he was doing, why he reacted the way that he did to certain people, to romance, why is he like this? And there's a moment actually towards the end of the sequel where he has a good friend of his who has kind of been with him through the ups and downs of his life. And there's a moment where his friend sits him down and is basically like, you're never gonna be happy unless you X, Y, Z. And I learned that at the same time that Winter learned that. Because I wrote that line, I was like, oh, that's why I wrote this book. That's how long it takes me to register what it is that I'm trying to say. And that's been consistent through all of the books that I've written. A lot of times I get asked, what themes were you aiming for writing this? What was your goal? And I'm like, I didn't know until, it came out. And sometimes it takes readers telling me. I think having that distance from the book, it makes it so that you can see what we're doing sometimes better than we can, and so it wasn't until much later in this series that I understood why I was putting these things in.
I love that. So, because I said I was going to put a pin in it, and I'm definitely coming back, his relationship with his dad. So in the first book, we learned that his dad was not the best and absent, but his presence was still heavily felt in Winter's life. Winter was, I guess you could say, living in this weird shadow of his dad and trying to, because he was just really grasping for parental love, which he didn't get. So poor baby. In the second book, it's like, hello, your dad's coming back, but he's coming back in the worst way for a celebrity pop star kid, especially with someone you're in a relationship with. But there was a really important pivotal, I'm trying so hard not to spoil this for you guys. There was a really pivotal moment in the nearest the end of Icon and Inferno, where you can kind of say there was a conclusion with his dad in the terms of a phone call or lack thereof. So walk us through their whole relationship, and what did you want to portray with their relationship, especially with that call?
Well, without giving too much away.
Because we're trying not to spoil.
Yeah, again, it kind of went back to me trying to figure out why Winter chose to take such an unusual route in life. He really had to give his entire, everything about him is dedicated to becoming, who he is, being on the stage. He's a very creative soul. He loves to write lyrics, he loves to write songs and all of that, but to really crave that need to be in the spotlight for him was what I was interested in digging up. And a lot of it revolves around his father. Even though his father wasn't really absent, the shadow of his father was very present in his life. And the problem with for Winter with his father is that Winter looks just like his dad. Like he looks just like him. So when he looks in the mirror, he sees his father all the time. And that's traumatic both for him and for his mom. So, and that, gets really into the weeds with their relationship without saying too much about it. So a lot of, that trauma for him is baked into his character and the entire plot of because he wouldn't have been taught to be a spy if he wasn't a pop star, and so none of them would have happened, and he wouldn't have become a pop star if it wasn't for his past. So, so it's a lot of just kind of like deconstructing a character. You go into a story with like this idea of like, I want to write about a pop star who gets tapped to become a spy, and then asking myself over and over like, but why, but why, but why, but why, until you get all the way down into like the nitty gritty of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. So let's take a quick pivot. It's going to be a longer than a quick pivot to Haley Dennings. Congratulations. Did your book not debut number 9 on New York's bestseller?
Thank you.
Yes. So congratulations and congratulations, congratulations. So how we're excited for you to write this book, because I've seen you all over TikTok. You've probably seen my noties pop up because I've been lurking.
Yeah, no, I always think I'm so annoying online because I say like the same thing every time. I'm like, guys, Black lesbian vampires during the Harlem Renaissance, like, come on, everyone needs to see the vision. And yeah, no, but I love posting about it because I feel like that community, like the book community is like, it's big, but it's small, compared to the rest of the internet. And I think even like the Sapphic community is also small, and then like the Black queer community is also really small. So I'm very loud there. I want people to know, because like I've had people come up to me saying like, it's so hard to find like Black Sapphic books, and so I'm like, this is why I wrote it, because like this is what I wanted when I was a kid, and like I didn't see stuff like this. So it's really cool to see that like that many people wanted it, to the point that like New York Times was like, wow, okay. And so yeah, it's been really surreal, and like I still can't believe it, but it's really cool like the way people have shown up for it. So yeah, it's great.
I love that that still works. I'm going to be amused by that for the rest of the day. Thank you all. So there is something I noticed with your book that I loved, because you did point it out on TikTok. I'm not saying again that I was lurking too deeply, but don't mind me. That when we talk about Layla and Elise, and we talk about the enemies to lovers pipeline, their enemies to lovers wasn't your average enemies to lovers, because they have the complicated layer, traumatic, childhood friend, enemies, love, and a lot of other things going on, and and I guess your take on it challenged a lot of what we think we know about enemies to lovers pipeline. So walk us through the journey you went to tell your own journey of enemies to lovers pipeline, and what kind of sets your work apart from others.
Oh my God, I feel like I could talk about this forever.
Well, we have time.
But I mean, honestly, it kind of started just because I'm really intrigued by like the queer friendship breakup, because I feel like a lot of times in queer communities, there's like the homoerotic, like super, super close friendship where it's like you think you're just platonic, but then it's like you're kind of codependent, and like maybe there's like a little bit of something else there. And like I've had my own friendship breakups in the past, nothing as intense as what they had here, thankfully. But I just really love, like, because I think especially for young adult books, like young adults have a lot of big emotions, teenagers dealing with a lot of hormones and stuff. So I was like, I need to go all in on the emotions and the angst. So that's why I really wanted like the childhood friends to enemies aspect, because I think it adds like an extra layer. Like enemies to lovers is already so intense, but then if you add like the past history and the relationships and the like, oh, you used to be my favorite person, like I know everything about you, and now like we're on opposite sides of this war, and like I'm supposed to kill you, but like again, like you used to be the person I went to, told all my secrets to. Like there's so many layers there, there's so much more nuance. Like it's not just rage, but it's also like grief for the past relationship that you had. And so that was like really, really fun for me to explore. And like I think also just I love the trope of like two characters that are like so different coming together to like defeat a greater evil, because they're forced to not only work through all the stuff going on with the plot and the mystery and the murders, but also like the stuff happening between them. So like there's so much going on, and yeah, that was a lot of fun for me to explore because I think like there's also a part of it, and I just talked about this on TikTok today, but I was like, I love the rise of like kind of messy, like almost toxic queer characters. I feel like for so long, especially in the Sapphic community, like we've been kind of tone police. Like people look at us and they're like, oh, they're girls, like they should be really like soft and sweet. But I'm like, no, I want messy, chaotic, unhinged, feral Sapphics. Like I love murderous, evil characters. And so I was like, I want to go like all in on that, but also I'm aware I'm like, it's young adult. I don't want people to like look at something that's super toxic and be like, I want that, because like, no, you don't, you really don't. So I'm like, I'm trying to be aware of like, they need to work through it, and like maybe they were a little bit toxic in the beginning, but they worked through it and they got better for each other. So there's a lot to kind of go through, and like as I was writing, I had to be really aware of that, because I'm like, I'm writing for a younger audience, and like I want them to root for the relationship, but I also want them to be aware that like there are things that they have to overcome and
still work through.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes, because that was one thing that I truly noticed. I can't remember which act, because I know I got stressed somewhere. But I remember seeing like, I'm glad they're together, or I'm glad they're getting to a point where they're going to have that angry blowout, like, yes, I love you, you idiot. Like, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. Even though it wasn't that. But each and every time I'm like, Layla, you want to fight her. You're using this as a metaphor for something else. And since this is, I don't know what the age range of this panel is, so I'm going to keep that to myself. Those who know. But I was like, I know you want to. Yeah. What's stopping you? Oh, right, trauma.
Right, exactly.
So it's like, okay. So it was an honest telling that true enemies to lovers, or when you're going through things, or when you're really upset with people, it's not easy as just to say, okay, we can pick up where we left off. Everything is easy peasy. But there are so many other things, because eventually, you know, especially with Elise's family being the Saints, and their whole business model is to kill Reapers. And here you have Layla, a whole Reaper. It's like, and Layla did try to kill Elise at one point. So it's not like all is forgiven, love you, baby. So would you say, in your opinion, that Layla is still fighting to be seen by Elise in their new dynamic and growing dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I mean, I'm kind of the belief that enemies to lovers is really hard to be done in just one book, especially like
hint, hint.
Childhood friends. Yeah, so I'm like, there needs to be, I think, a longer arc, and like they have so much history between them, and like so many like bad times along with the good times. And so like the whole thing with Reapers is that like people don't see them as human, because like they technically aren't, but they're also like so close to being human. So there's that like difficulty for them of like not being seen as how they truly are, and Layla definitely still struggles with that. And I know, like, I wanted to make it very clear that, like, just because you, like, have feelings for someone, that doesn't fix, like, the social, like, issues surrounding, you know, their identities and the things that have happened in the past. So there's still a lot that they have to work through. But I think they've definitely got through a lot of it in book one. And then book two, of course, there's still going to be a lot of drama and tension. Because, again, I believe that enemies to lovers, like, I think it's so much more fun when it's like the back and forth. And I know some people get frustrated, but like I love slow burn. So I'm like, in my book, it's like, yeah, it's just like one kiss, but like it's so worth it when you get to that point after like so many pages of fighting and bickering and back and forth, and like they literally tried to kill each other. And so like you don't just get over that in 1 second. Like there has to be a lot more like communication, and not just like physical stuff, but actual talking. So
Yes, because it's not like they have time to go to a therapist or, you know, ponder things, because a lot of stuff is going on. So it's not like do shadow work, you have time, baby. It's not like Harlem is burning. It's fine. I love that for you. Forehead kiss. So let's take it back to Marie, because I need to come back to Sydney, because she's definitely... Thank you to you for not making her give up her spy work for a boy.
So Sydney is too. Yeah, Sydney is too practical for that.
Yes, and she is back, and I'm glad that her lungs aren't killing her. Like, I'm assuming it's because now it's out in the open, she's able to train more and do the things and not go through,
Working
problems.
through it, yeah.
So Sydney is dealing with the wants of a like 19, 20-year-old, versus where she was when she first started at 15. Because she joined when she was 15, and back then, her mom just passed, her dad is an alcoholic, brother, meh. So there's nothing really tethering her to that small town. So she was all for it, gung ho, okay, let's do this. Now, fast forward maybe 4 or 5 years, she meets Winter, they have an amazing connection, they seem to meet each other where they're at, bullets flying, all of that stuff, because where is love if there's not like terror? So it's, now she's changing and everything is just kind of coming at her, a little bit fast. New relationships, coming to terms with a lot of chosen family things, and especially with Niall and his
Niall,
daughter,
yeah.
especially since he's retiring. So, again, thank you for not making her give up being a spy for a boy. What do you want us to learn from Sydney's journey now that we're in book 2? And what do you want us to understand about her journey?
Yeah, I love answering questions about Sydney because she is one of my favorite characters to write. She was prickly though, like I had real trouble with her, so she fought me every step of the way. But with Sydney, oh sorry, I'm terrible at this stuff.
No.
Thank you. Sydney is very much a foil to Winter. The two of them are foils to each other, and I love kind of building characters like that where when I come up with a character, I tend to come up with like a group of them at the same time. There's not usually like one that pops up. It was Winter and immediately Sydney existed. And so I developed them at the same time, and I wanted them to represent kind of different ways that you approach dealing with trauma. Like, I loved what you were saying earlier, like everyone comes at it from a different way. Like we all have our different ways of dealing with stuff. Winter and Sydney don't have the exact same history, but they have very similar trauma, but they come at it in completely different ways. Like Winter is basically just like, I wear my heart on my sleeve, I love everyone very quickly, as long as you love me back. That's his way of dealing. Whereas Sydney is just like, she's like, I don't need anyone, I don't need anything, love is an illusion. Her way of dealing is she runs away from stuff. Like she ran away from home, she runs away from love, she runs away from feelings. Anything that's like feels threatening to her, that makes her feel vulnerable, she's just like, Fortress comes up with the barbed wire, which is not how Winter deals with stuff at all. So when they first meet, they're just like, what is wrong with you? He's just like, I don't understand why you're so guarded all the time, and she's just like, I don't understand why you're the way you are. You're just like a bratty pop star. So I love playing with that dynamic between them. Mm-hmm. And with Sydney, I wanted to show that for her, her greatest fear is basically coming to terms with all these things that she's running from. And that's part of why she makes a great spy, because when she got recruited, they were basically just like, you look like you have no connections with anybody. Would you like to work for a spy? And she's like, absolutely. And so the whole series is just her like being a spy to run from emotions until she meets Winter. And suddenly she has met someone who she can't get out of her head. She's trying to figure out how to work with him, but also at the same time, he's bringing up all these insecurities that she has about herself. He sees her for who she is. He calls her out on BS, and she doesn't know how to deal with that. And it makes her a little crazy, and vice versa for Winter. And I wanted to play with that dynamic. And by the end of the second book, she really has to learn how to come to terms with herself if she wants to not be destroyed by this, where you just give your whole soul away to that. So it meant a lot to me exploring Sydney's journey, and showing the way that she learns to heal from her own traumas.
Yes, and definitely I loved how they both learned something from each other.
Yes.
Because her personality and her way of dealing with things definitely helped Winter in Icon Inferno when he was dealing with that phone call from his dad, which was beautiful. And then she had a pivot where she also learned something from Winter, because I bring up Niall, and he became like the dad she never had. And for the years that, she was training, he was always there. And yes, he was a tough trainer and all the things, but he still treated her like a surrogate daughter, the daughter he never had kind of thing, even though we find out, shocker, he has a daughter, but because of the whole spy work, he can't always engage. And because we knew he was retiring, there was this, okay, he's going to see his daughter, and you can see the anxiety and just kind of dread and just kind of not knowing what to do with those feelings happening with Sydney. So tell us about her relationship with Niall, especially since in the end she did end up meeting his daughter, which I'm not going to spoil, but you're welcome.
Yeah, I think that building Sydney's relationship with Niall, who is her kind of like mentor, one of her mentors that she has once she joins the spy agency, was really important for her character development because I needed somebody that she could anchor herself to. Otherwise, she's just completely like cold and cut off. Yeah. And you had mentioned this, like her meeting Winter was her way of accessing this, like recognizing that she was building a family. Like she has gone through her whole life not having a family really that she can count on, and the whole series is kind of about found family. Like this is one of my favorite tropes. The people who really care about you don't necessarily have to be blood, even though a lot of the people we care about are blood. A lot of the people that I love most in the world are people that you find in life along the way. And for her, Niall is that guy. Like he is tough on her, but he is there for her when she needs him, and she doesn't think about that really until it gets real. And Winter is somebody who helps her start to see that. And I think through getting to know Winter, she just starts to understand, like, it's okay sometimes to be vulnerable. It's okay to let your heart be wounded, because it means that you care about something. It means that somebody meant something to you. Like we grieve because grief is the price you pay for loving someone, and she has to really understand that the two go hand in hand. And so she learns to heal because of the people around her. And I wanted to make sure that was apparent with her building her found family with Niall and with Sauda and other people in her life.
Oh, I love that. Now hold your book. This is a great book, and you need to be proud of it and display it. So a small pivot back to Haley, because let's talk about my favorite, intergenerational trauma and how it shows up in individuals and relationships. So in this book, we've kind of tapped on it. We see Elise and her father, and they have a very emotionally toxic relationship. We see him yell at her. We see him using the death of her older sister against her to manipulate and make her the compliant, obedient, perfect daughter and head of the saints, even though that was a many steps. So walk us through the creation of Elise and the intergenerational trauma in Black families.
This is such a big question.
Yes, because I am a Virgo.
I mean, I am a reader of many books by Black authors that discuss intergenerational trauma. I think especially if you're going to do historical, it's kind of hard to not acknowledge that, and especially when you're dealing with families. And I mean, my family is not like Elise's family, thank God. I have people ask me that. They're like, is the dad based on your family? And I'm like, no, thank God. But yeah, he's really terrible. And I honestly I think I really was thinking about Elise first, because I come up with like the characters and their desires, their needs first. And I noticed right away, like, she's a very passionate, emotional girl and a perfectionist. And I was like, why is she the way that she is? Because, like, she does have, like, some issues. Like, she has OCD, depression, anxiety, like, stuff that I deal with. And there obviously are, like, external factors that contribute to that as well. And I was like, well, familial pressures, of course, would do that. And so that's where her dad came in, being this bully and terrible person to her, who, again, like I said earlier, it's like he doesn't see himself in that way. Like, he genuinely is just thinking that he's doing the best for his family. And I do think that, like, I think in Black communities and like marginalized communities, sometimes there is this expectation that you have to be like 10 times better to get even like half as much. And so maybe you sacrifice like important connections to your family to succeed in these ways. And so definitely saw that a lot with the Saint family and feeling like they have to be perfect all the time. Otherwise, other people are going to look down on them because there are already people looking down on them just because of the color of their skin. So those expectations bled into the family and caused a lot of chaos. I think I also was kind of inspired by like some of the stuff that I saw in the show Succession. There's this really great quote about like, oh, maybe the poison drips through. And I'm like, that's exactly what's going on with this family. Because it's like they had terrible things happen like to her parents. And instead of them working on that trauma and like trying to do better for their kids, they kind of like let it get to them. And then like it bled into their children in the way that they raised them. And so I really see Elise as like her trying to break that cycle and stop it with her younger sister. And then Layla has her own kind of like pseudo family with the Reapers.
And Jamie. I'm not calling him by that pseudo name either.
That's very valid. He's a silly man. But yeah, no, she's had to find family in other places. And like that's where I think her and Elise kind of like fight a bit, because Layla's like, you're so lucky to still have your family, and Elise is like, I don't feel that lucky because my family is like really terrible to me. And you know, you kind of see that with Sterling too, who also lost his family, and like Elise's family is his new family, and he doesn't understand why Elise can't just like take everything that Tobias is doing to her. But yeah, like we talked about, people deal with their grief in different ways, and for Sterling, he's like, I'm gonna hold on to what I can, doesn't matter how bad it is. And Elise is like, I think that I can do better, so I don't need to hold on to that. And then Layla's like kind of similar in that way. But yeah, it was really important to me to just explore the various ways that people can deal with those things. And the families, I just wanted to show that, like, you know, someone can look perfect and pristine and amazing on the outside, like how the Saint Empire tries to make themselves seem, but then on the inside, there's always way more to the story. So, yeah.
Were you looking at my phone? Because that was literally my next question. How dare you? But I will pivot because I'm glad we brought up Layla, because I did want to bring up Layla and chosen families, because one of the things I liked, and feel free to jump in and clarify, the one thing I did love is how you still gave Reapers humanity, and how, because with Layla, she knows she's a Reaper, this is what it is, but she had such a rich life prior. And there are times where you see her like still mourning that life and still thinking about that life, and people just saying Reapers are Reapers, who cares? But you have moments where you see Reapers doing everyday things like working at the Cotton Club and dancing and having love because she had love with May and things like that. And the struggle for her to explain how Reapers are not too far off from humans to Layla, and how, you know, how she explains that to Elise, and how Elise kind of has that back and forth. So again, pivoting to that, chosen families with Layla, feel free to dive into that. And what it looks like when you're going through trauma and you don't know you're going through it, and you end up projecting it onto others.
Yeah, another big question. I love it.
Virgo.
Yeah, I mean, I think like that's why I wanted to write specifically like the human versus not human character, because they're different on that level. But then also there are other things that come into play in the way that different people like perceive humanity. And I specifically wanted to write a book where, you know, we can look at humanity through a non-human lens, like with creatures that have been immortal, who've seen the worst of humanity and the things that humans have done to other humans. And so there are a lot of like big things I wanted to explore there. And it's a lot. I'm still trying to like figure it out with book 2 as well, but definitely with Elise and Layla, like I've had questions about like, like, well, what if you turned Elise into a Reaper? And I'm like, I just think that changes the dynamic so much, because like the whole point is that they're trying to like see past their differences and to understand each other. Like, you know, by putting themselves in each other's shoes, but then also just like being sympathetic without having to go that far. And so, yeah, I really liked that part of their relationship and them being willing to, you know, see past those issues. And then the found family, of course, was really important to me. I love that trope, but I think with the Reaper community, it's very different because they have like so many stakes and like so many things stacked against themselves. Like they already have so many like preconceived notions that, you know, not just like non-Black people put onto them, but also humans. And so they're kind of prickly towards each other because, you know, they've lost so much and they're like, well, why would I build another connection when I could just lose that as well? Because things are very dangerous for them. But then there are some of them who are willing to do that because, I mean, like Marie said, like grief is the price you pay for, you know, putting yourself out there and loving someone. And so, yeah, I really wanted to explore all the various different ways that you can see that in those communities.
Love that. So we're nearing close-ish to time for Q&A. So for those who have Q&A, the mics are right here. So definitely think of your questions. So while we gear towards Q&A, I want to bring attention and just talk about the queer representation in both of your books because that was so much love. We'll start with Marie. So even though I don't think your book is specifically advertised as queer, but we do see, I think, an important relationship between Winter and one of his closer friends, Damien. And the one thing I do want to point out is, because you didn't clarify, you know, what Winter may or may not be, but I just wanted to make sure it's pointed out that he is or could be in a straight presenting relationship, but that does not erase his bi-ness, his pan-ness, or queerness. So was that something intentional to do, or how did you like slide that into the book?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you're asking this because it did mean a lot to me. I think that with almost all of my books, I strive to make it look like a representation of reality. Even though what I'm writing is obviously fiction, I want to make it feel like, oh, this is something that I can believe in. And I don't think it's possible to do that without putting queer representation in books because that's not the world that we live in, you know? So I just think that's required for making realistic fiction. So it's always very intentional. I'm a very chaotic writer. I don't usually intend a lot of things, but this is something that I very much believe in. All the various representations in my books are, you know, I come at it in that way, and I thought a lot about it with Winter. I just wanted to show him as a whole person. I wanted to show him as a complicated person who has complicated relationships with all the people in his life. I think he really needed to have this friend in his life. Damien is someone who kind of steers Winter in the right direction when he's going down the wrong path, and he's that friend who just knows you. Like he can see you, and you just sit there, and like Damien's always, you can always see him in the chapters, he's just like side-eyeing things. He's that friend who like is very good at judging people like immediately, so he can always tell when someone's toxic for Winter, and he will usually try to warn him. He usually sees through things before Winter can, and is basically just kind of watching out quietly for him. And I loved building their relationship. You know, it's not like a central arc in the story, but I felt like it was really important to have a complete character for Winter.
That. And Haley, no hidden secret, sapphic horror, bloodfest, like Layla cheating in my head, cheating on Elise with May, but not cheating on Elise with May, but you know, all of that love. So do talk about that. And you mentioned on TikTok, and you mentioned earlier that this book or the story was based on a friendship breakup that changed your brain chemistry?
Yeah.
I lurked, I'm telling you.
Yeah. I mean, I think the traumatic friendship breakup it did change my brain chemistry. I feel like there was like me before the breakup and then me after. So definitely drew a lot from those emotions for them. And I mean, Layla and Elise, they're lesbians. I say like, oh, my sapphic vampire book, but I also want people to know that like they are lesbians and you can call them lesbians because that's what they are. And yeah, it was just important that I could show queer girls being themselves, doing whatever they needed to do, not being tone police, not you know, having these expectations and kind of being forced under them. And so it was fun to kind of get to explore the toxicity, but also showing them growing out of it and realizing, you know, what they really needed to do to feel true to themselves. And it's interesting because like when I was writing the book and coming up with their relationship, I always knew that like they were each other's, like they're each other's people. And so like in terms of their sexuality, it didn't like occur to me that they were lesbians until like after I had written the book, because I was like, oh no, they just like love each other. Like there's never going to be anyone else for them, which I know is like kind of corny because it's like they're teenagers. Like I don't know, like when they grow up, who knows if they'll even last. But yeah, I don't know. It's
Can Layla even grow up?
I mean, like sure, maybe, but. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's nice though to be able to write these books and kind of have that like time capsule of like them just being who they are in the moment and not having to worry about the future and, you know, the other things. And I get a lot of questions sometimes like, oh, why did you write like about sapphics, or why did you write like a majority Black cast? And I love talking about that, but I also think the question's kind of funny because I'm like, I don't think that you ask these of like white authors writing straight characters, and it's like, why do I have to like explain that? But I also love to talk about sapphics, so I don't really care. But I'm also aware of that, so. But yeah, no, I love like queer media, especially like sapphics in horror. I want more unhinged, murderous female characters in horror, because I think there's like a really fine line between like love and hate, and then also like danger and desire. And so getting to really dive into that with like the cannibalistic aspect of like vampirism, and like kind of how there's also that just desire to like be so close to someone, it doesn't matter if it's like through blood. Love that.
Love that. Awesome. Well, time for Q&A. So definitely if you have any questions, because I can talk to them forever, but I would love to hear from those in the audience. So feel free, the mic's right there. Oh, I see people moving. Oh, thank you. And I didn't have to say anything. You can go first. We'll start over here.
Hello. As I'm sure many people here are, I was a huge fan of the Legends series growing up. And yes. And I remember being so frustrated that at the end, the main characters didn't have like a very perfectly wrapped up ending with their relationship. So my question is, as you're planning out a series with like multiple books, do you know from the start where you kind of want those characters' relationships to end, and like how many books you want that to take, or how do you kind of figure that out?
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for reading the series. It means the world to me. Also, I'm so sorry for the trauma that it has caused. I get angry emails every day about that, so I hear you. But yeah, I don't usually know where they're going. Like I said, I'm very chaotic when I write, and I go into every story thinking that I know what the characters are gonna do. I very much feel like a very bad director on a movie where I'm like on a stepladder with like a megaphone telling everyone that they need to be in these certain spots, and my actors are just like not listening. They're like off in their trailers doing whatever. So it very much felt like that. Like they and June kind of took on a life of their own, so you can blame them and not me for what they ended up doing to each other. I didn't know the ending for Champion until I was writing the end of Prodigy. So to be fair, my original ending for Champion was much darker. So I would like to pat myself on the back for giving you the better version of that, which I know doesn't really say much. But yeah, I think that part of me exploring my characters in that way and not knowing what was the reason why I wrote Rebel, 7 years later, where I was like, I thought I had put everything to bed, and then 7 years later I was like, nope, there's still stuff going on here. And that was why I wrote Rebel. So I hope that it still felt satisfactory in some way for you guys. But I'm just very grateful that you followed the characters. So thank you.
Thank you. Book nerd.
Hello. Just to say thank you for everything, all of you on this stage, for hosting the event, signing our books, and our fan art. I do have a question for Marie. I've read nearly every book you've published, and with almost all of them, I noticed repeating concepts, not necessarily themes, but concepts. You almost always have a beloved sibling, sometimes they're dead, and you almost always pit your protagonists against each other in some way, which I love. That's one of the reasons why I read everything that you put out. Are you conscious of these concepts, and do you think they're inspired by anything in your life, or are they just tropes that you enjoy writing about?
Thank you so much. Also, like, part of the reason why I'm always putting my protagonists against each other is just I just love enemies to lovers. We're just like, and I loved especially when you were like childhood best friends to enemies to lovers is my favorite spin on enemies to lovers because there's so much more tension when that happens.
Especially when one tries to kill you.
Yeah, it makes it really complicated. So I think that's why I approach that one over and over. I just love it. And otherwise, with the sibling thing, so I'm an only child. I'm totally happy being an only child, but I think this is why I am capable of writing very like terrible things into stories for siblings. And I'm just like curious to explore that. So I find myself constantly putting different combinations of sibling relationships into stories, and I think it's because I don't have that kind of attachment in my life. So I just like to freely go out there and explore, different versions of it. I just find it interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Wonderful session. My question is for Haley. I can't wait to have a novel to sink my teeth into, pun intended. 1920s Harlem, iconic period and place. And then the vampire mystery romance aspect. Which idea were you drawn to first? And when did you realize to put them together for your novel?
I love this question because it came from so many different places. I think the vampires came first because I was having a conversation with my friend about like immortality and what it would be like if you were someone who's getting super old, but like it's not glamorized, like you're not always beautiful, but like you start rotting with age. And so like that's where the Reapers came from. Because I also think like it's so interesting to explore humanity from like a non-human and immortal lens. So it started there, and then I also was like reading a bunch of books set during the Harlem Renaissance, and I actually originally wanted to set the book in like San Francisco because I'm from the Bay Area, and I was like, I know that, it would be like less research. But then I was like, but I wasn't alive in the 1920s, so it would be more research. And I was like, if I'm gonna do the 1920s with Black people, and I really wanna explore like corruption and like the decadence with like blood-soaked like opulence, and like we have to do the Harlem Renaissance because I also love that period. It's iconic, and I feel like there's not enough like young adult media specifically that deals with it. So then it all just came together then, and I think it worked really well. Yeah.
Thank you.
This question is for Marie. I loved your Legend series, and I thought the characters and plot were so thoughtfully developed. This is probably more of a generic question, but I'd love to hear more about the inspiration behind your debut novel and story concept.
Yeah, thank you. Gosh, let me go back in time. So Legend came out in 2011. So I started writing Legend in 2009. This is a very different time in our timeline. I think Obama had just been elected, but you could kind of see the country was fracturing a little bit. That was the year that Gabby Giffords got shot. So I had a lot of like political stuff on my mind when I was writing Legend. And that was also when like, we've been through like the apocalypse several times now with like COVID. So, but back in 2009, 2010, that was when we were all like, the end of the world is gonna be so much fun. Like, we were all like, 2012 is coming, and we had all these movies out about it. So it was much more comfortable, I guess, to write about like, yay, dystopia, and approach it in a very different way. So I remember I was reading some article about climate change, and there was a map that showed what the entire world would look like in like 100 years or so, and basically like half of America was just gone. It was so like everything from Florida to East Texas was gone. I was like, oh, disturbing. And then in California, which is where I live in LA, there was like this giant lake that stretched from LA all the way up to San Francisco. And I lived in LA, and I thought it was funny when you were like, oh, it'd be so much less work to just set it where I live. So I was just like, I'm gonna set it where I live. and just take the easy way out so I could just drive around the city and do research on what will the Walt Disney Concert Hall look like when it's halfway underwater. So that was the inspiration for the place. And then for Day in June, I was watching the old movie version of Les Miserables one day, the one with like Liam Neeson in it. And I just had this moment of like, it would be really fun to write like a teen version of like a detective versus a criminal cat and mouse chase. So that plus, dystopian half underwater LA was where I ended up with Legend. And yeah, that was how the story came to be.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, hi. Thank you so much for doing the panel. This question is for Haley. Also, I meant to take a picture with you, and I forgot. So my question is, I am an aspiring writer, and I was wondering what was the most challenging aspect of publishing your book, especially as a Black queer novel.
Well, first of all, good luck with your writing.
Thank you.
It's so exciting, I think, like being a writer and getting to talk to other writers. And honestly, one of the most challenging parts was probably just like putting myself out there, because I'd been online for a long time and I have like critique partners and stuff, but then like actually sending my book to publishers was really hard. I have the most amazing agent and I have an amazing publishing team now, but actually being on submission and like getting the rejections and like, because a lot of the rejections I got, they weren't really like, they didn't like give me anything I could work with. They'd be like, this is too dark, or like it's too like heavy on the race stuff. And I'm like, I mean, it is a historical book about Black people. I don't really know what they're expecting. And like, it was especially hard because a lot of them had requested it like based on my pitch. So I was like, I mean, I feel like you should have expected this. And then like, there was one person who was like, I think that Elise should have ended up with her male best friend. And I was like,
Sterling?
oh, no. She's a lesbian. That was never gonna happen. But thanks for your input. Like, I don't know. So like, that was the hard part, because it's like, there's nothing I can do about the way that people perceive my book. And it's always been harder for, authors of color, and if you're queer, it's even harder. But I mean, I made it through, and I have a great team now. So I always just say, like, don't give up, because there are people who want your story, and like, the only person who can like really stop you is you. So like, don't count yourself out before you get there. Just write what you want and be passionate about it, because you're also gonna have to read your book 100 times, so make sure that you love it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Can we go over?
This question is for
Oh,
Marie.
no. Their turn. Sorry.
So thanks to all of you for being at this panel, answering our questions. I'm also working on my first book. It's also a sapphic romantasy, and actually you would love the main character because she's actually also the antagonist and is very unhinged and very chaotic lesbian. So you would, yeah. So again, as someone writing a sapphic romantasy, how do you, who also writes sapphic romantasy, I should say, how do you avoid falling into common tropes and like getting stuck in common tropes, especially when writing something like Enemies to Lovers, which is in itself a common trope?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like just having it be sapphic like sets it apart already, because like there's not a whole lot of like enemies to lovers sapphic romantasy. So just that, like, you're already doing great. And I also think that like you can put your own spin on anything. Like, enemies to lovers is a very popular trope, but tropes are in all books, and as long as you can like add your own like unique twist on it, it'll be just fine. Also, people love enemies to lovers so much, specifically because it's tropey, it's familiar. So like, even if you do feel like it's getting too cliche or familiar, people are still gonna love it because that's what they love about it. So I'm very excited for your book. Good luck.
Hello, before this makes me a rebel, even though I'm a rebel without a cause, we have 4 more. Can we keep going? Okay, 2 more it is. So you 2 are our last ones. Thank you.
This question is for Marie. So I've read almost all of your books, and in all of the ones that I've read, like something horrible is always happening to the characters all the time.
Thing with you?
So I was just wondering, did any elements in your life, if any, like inspire what happens to characters in your books?
Do you like people?
I'm sorry, so sorry again for all of the trauma I've caused. There's nothing specifically from my life in the trauma that's happened to my characters, but they are all kind of informed by things that I find really interesting or that I've witnessed or that I think about. It's not to say that I don't have elements of my life in my books, but they're like diffused throughout it in a way that you can't, like, there's no one-to-one to any of my books. I think I just really like to make characters suffer because it makes for interesting tension. I don't know. Look, listen, when I was 8, I wrote my first short story that I ever wrote was basically this cat that like sacrifices itself to save his family from a house fire. That was my first story that I ever wrote. I was 8. I don't know. I thought it was great, and my parents were like, "This seems dark. We should get this looked into."
At 8?
I don't know. I mean, anyway, I'm very sorry about everything that I've done.
It's okay, and thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
And you love your core.
Thank you. This is the last question, and it's to both of you. So you both, in your novels, you have one main romantic relationship, but something I've struggled with is balancing other relationships that characters have, so that way it's not like there's not too many relationships taking precedence. So my question is, how do you balance relationships so it feels like they're all building into the character instead of competing with one another?
Also love your nails.
Thank you.
Do you guys need it? Haley.
Well, I think that's such a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. That's a really, really thoughtful question. I think that there's as much room as you can make for each of the relationships in the book, and I think they all, in terms of like the side relationships, for me, they all kind of contribute to the overall arc of the story. And it doesn't necessarily mean that every chapter has to be like on the path to the conclusion, but they all kind of inform the main characters in some way. There were several side romances, relationships in Stars and Smoke that inform what happens to Sydney and Winter, and in Sky Hunter as well, and some of my other books, there are a lot of like side relationships and romances and familial things that really affect how the main characters move forward and how the world is structured. And for me, that's how I end up balancing it, where I'm like, what is important to this to get across the main idea of the story?
Yeah, and I'm the same way as well. Whenever I start a book, I always have like a question or thesis that I want to answer. And I always go into every character the same. Like, I don't try and like single out side characters because they're side characters. I want to treat them like they're real people so that they feel real and well-rounded and developed. And I always try and make sure that their actions and their relationships are somehow shaping an answer to the thesis or question that I have at the beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
Thank
thank you
you
to
so much.
everyone. Yes. Round of applause.